This video is not intended to encourage or glorify any kind of drug use. The sole purpose of these videos is to educate you on the dangers of what these substances can do to you. Please do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video. I repeat, do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video. I had been abusing methamphetamine pills for the past 2 years or so. Things had really started to get out of control during the last few months. My relationship was falling apart and my partner asked me to leave our home until I was clean. I had nowhere to go, so I took all of my belongings and drove 8 hours to a friend's house. I had many misadventures along the way, but that is part of a different story. Unbeknownst to me, my friend was also a recovering stimulant addict. He also is a medical professional and a fellow psychonaut. We took LSD and shrooms together over the course of 3 days. Without judgment, this friend of mine showed me how to use the power of psychedelics in ways I'd never been able to achieve on my own. He gently guided me to confront my addiction issues, and by the time I left his home 1 week later, I had dumped my entire stash and was committed to never touching any drugs other than weed or psychs ever again, or so I thought. I came home to my partner, who accepted me with open arms, as long as I could stay clean. She said she had the man she fell in love with back. I started a new job a few weeks later. This is when I should have spotted the warning signs that I may have been a bit overconfident in my abilities to beat this addiction overnight. Once I got back into the daily grind, getting up at 5 a.m. and working every single day, I didn't have any cravings for stimulants. However, I was still craving something. I was smoking at least 1/8 of weed a day. I started to take kratom every day before work to get up and moving early in the morning. I would typically order my drugs online from plugs I had met over the years. I was looking for a good price and some good weed, and took a chance ordering from a vendor that I was familiar with, but had not done much business with in the past. This is where everything starts to fall apart again. I got the package in the mail, and when I opened it, I was surprised to find about a 1/4 bag of crystal meth. I contacted the vendor, who had some bullshit excuse about how he mixed up his packs and he would reship my weed. This vendor knew that I was trying to get clean off of stims, and he told me I should flush the bag immediately. I should have taken his advice. Of course, I did not. My plan was to sell his bag to an acquaintance and make some extra money, so I held on to it for a few days until I could meet up with the guy and make the sale. The next morning, crawling out of bed at 5 a.m., my old addict brain possessed me again. Might as well just have a little line before work, one last hurrah, no one will know but you, and plus you're getting rid of it all in a couple days anyway. I did a small line, felt that old familiar feeling kick in. Even while I was chopping up the line, I remember thinking to myself, this is a horrible mistake, but the addict side won. After work, I decided to redose. I cut up a fat line this time. I did not have much experience with pure crystal and was used to taking pressed pills. I'm not sure how much I actually dosed the second time, but I knew as soon as it went up my nose that it was way too much. I didn't sleep that night, but I had been overstimmed so many times. I knew that as long as I didn't redose, I'd get through the day and be able to crash the second night. No sleep came the second night either, or the third night. That is when I became concerned because the meth should have been out of my system by then. It was on the evening of the 4th day that the hallucinations began. The first thing I remember is laying on my bed and reaching for a cup of water on my nightstand. I went to grab it and my hand passed right through. The strangest confusion washed over me. I tried to grab it again, and even though I could see the cup clear as day, my hand passed through like Patrick Swayze in Ghost. I looked away and looked back, and the cup was still there. Even when I knew it was a hallucination, I could not unsee it. Then the shadow people. Creeping out of my closet in the corners of my bedroom were the outlines of these entities slowly floating toward me. They looked like they were wearing hoodies and had no faces, but they felt intelligent and I could sense nothing but pure evil emanating from them. I started getting really worried and figured I should probably go to the hospital, but this meant I had to confess to my partner. I'd gone behind her back and relapsed. I'd been playing it off as if I was sick up to this point, but decided I needed to confess. I told her I believed I had entered meth-induced psychosis and I might need to go to the hospital. She was very upset with me. We weighed the pros and cons of going to the emergency room. I didn't want to be locked up in a mental ward and knew if I was able to just fall asleep, I would wake up right as rain. My partner was so upset with me, she basically said I put myself in this situation, and if I want to go to the hospital, then I can call for an ambulance myself. I should mention that I probably downplayed the severity of my psychosis as to not freak her out and to lessen the blow of having broken my promise to stay clean once again to her. I decided I would try to sleep it off one more night. This is when I truly broke away and lost all touch with the real world. I remember thinking that my friend had directed a movie that he never told me about, and it was on YouTube, and I decided to put it on. The plot had something to do with multiple intersecting stories of these characters trying to survive an apocalyptic event. There was some kind of huge explosion that decimated most of the earth. To my delight, my friend had based one of the characters in the film on me and another one of our friends. He also had based a character on himself. My character had called my two friends and we made plans to meet at his house and try to ride out the apocalypse together. This slowly started to change perspectives. I was no longer watching the plot unfold in a movie. I was now experiencing the movie as the character that was based on myself. I met up with one friend, we can call Phil, by somehow transporting to his house, and then we drove to my other friend's home, we can call Bob, who lived in another city. When we got to his house, we entered through a side door. He lived in an attached duplex, and next to him lived an elderly black couple and their two grandchildren. We did not make any contact with them yet, but I could see everything that was unfolding in their home as well, sort of like I was switching back and forth between first person and movie mode. We decided to hunker down and smoke some weed at Bob's house. The next thing I remember, I could see the entire destroyed earth reconstruct itself. The world went from complete ruin back to normal in a matter of seconds, and there was some sense that this was a digital world, like when you die in a video game and then restart at the save point. However, we didn't get to rejoin the world, and we were stuck in this apocalyptic dimension, looking down over the pristine earth that went about its business as if nothing happened. All of the people who had died in the apocalypse were reset in the exact positions that they were in when the world ended, and were none the wiser anything had occurred at all. This included alternate versions of ourselves that got to finish living our lives while we were trapped in this purgatory. It turns out that the family that lived next to Bob were trapped in purgatory with us as well. There is an entire subplot that is very fuzzy to me now that involved us going back to Earth and murdering our own replacements and living out their lives, but each time we did, the apocalypse would happen again and we would end up in the exact situation. After some kind of eternity, myself, Phil, Bob, and Bob's neighbors had all accepted our fates. We were trapped in purgatory in this desolate wasteland forever. Then a new plot development occurred. The old man that lived next to Bob used to be a brilliant engineer and had all sorts of blueprints and science books in his basement. He had regretted wasting his life away with drinking and had let his great mind go to waste. Additionally, Bob and the oldest daughter that lived next door ended up having children, and somehow their children had children. We had used the old man's books and blueprints to reinvent the battery. We were then able to harness electricity and use it to watch the film that I thought my friend Phil had directed, which was the delusion I was currently living out. The old man preached to his children and great-grandchildren about how they should not waste their brains and to not follow in his footsteps. Then he would tell tales of the old world and would show the film. Some time had passed and we had repopulated this desolate land with hundreds of people, but they were all deformed from inbreeding and they didn't look completely human. They resembled something like orcs from the Lord of the Rings. They turned watching Phil's movie into a sort of ritual, and eventually an entire religion was built upon it. Meanwhile, the old man passed away, but the youngest of his granddaughters continued to work endlessly on one of the inventions he had written a blueprint for. This device was completed, and then we somehow used it to open a portal down to Earth. Another device was invented that created glowing orbs that were human souls. It became our job to create all the new souls and send them down to Earth. These souls knew of Phil's movie and of us, and we became the gods and goddesses of a new religion for all of humanity. One of the orbs was the Messiah, and we put Jesus on Earth. Our intentions were always good, and we hoped for peace. After thousands of years, we had finally somehow figured out how to get to heaven. We had been trapped in limbo for so long. Heaven was through some sort of portal, and when you went through, you would stay there for 10,000 years and then return. The catch was that you could only go one time, but the experience was pure bliss and ecstasy. I didn't want to experience heaven without my partner and our son, so I had to wait for them to die and join me in limbo. They said when they finally came, it was magical, and I sobbed when I saw them again, and we all walked into heaven together. The next thing I remember, the movie was over, and I was very confused. I kept peeking out the blinds to see if the outside world looked normal, or if the apocalypse had actually happened. I assumed that it must have happened, and that I was now in heaven with my partner, as she was laying next to me. I woke her up and tried to explain to her that we were dead and to not go outside. I still don't think she understood the extent of my psychosis at that point, because I could recognize her and where I was, and she got up and went to work. The series of the next set of delusions are all sort of jumbled together. I'm not sure if they were happening simultaneously, or if I was experiencing them in some sort of linear fashion. For a time, I was living at my father's house. He had modified his home to fit a strange new lifestyle. This involved being in constant flow with the sun. You would wake up each day and look into a mirror that reflected sunlight into your eyes for 20 seconds immediately each morning. When you slept, you would be snuggled against this strange pliable rod that would keep you in constant motion, rolling you over slowly. You would sleep every 4 hours for an hour. There was an alarm system that went off and played the same song when it was time to wake up. The song was by some really popular teeny bopper band that dressed up in Barney-style creature costumes. When you were not sleeping, you would be outside in constant sunlight. There were activities you would do until the sleep alarm went off. Each activity involved some sort of sun ritual-based exercise. At one point, I was trying to sleep on the couch that had an electric stovetop inside of the cushions. I kept turning it on and burning myself, and it was painful and terrifying. There was a tractor on my father's property, and I took it for a joyride at night. I drove into town and stumbled upon a festival that seemed to be related to a holiday like Thanksgiving. All of the townspeople were gathered along the main street. I came across a group of police officers on a tall hill above the crowd. There was a giant pig they had on a leash. They were going to have a stuntman ride the pig down the hill and into the crowd of people. This was some kind of tradition that was held annually. I took it upon myself to hop on the pig and took it for an exhilarating joyride. The cops found it amusing, and the crowd all cheered when I made it all the way down the hill. I made a big speech into a microphone and then went back to the house. They had captured the entire thing on film, and I was able to share it with my family. This is when my fiancée may have returned home because she was there with me at my dad's house. She kept telling me that it wasn't my dad's house, and I would be confused, and it would turn back into our house for just a moment and then back to my dad's. This is when I could feel my brain start to melt. I started to lose all cognitive function. It felt like an invalid. I was convinced I would have to live the rest of my life this way, or until I became a vegetable. Then my brother showed up. He was using some kind of drug and had moved into my house to take care of me. I kept finding dirty needles all over the place. I didn't trust him. I then walked into my room and caught him in bed with my partner, and they both had a dirty look of guilt on their faces. I'd lost most of my brain by then, was aware that I was very confused. I was convinced I just walked in on my own brother with my woman and began to get very upset. My fiancée was insisting it didn't happen and said she had to take me to the hospital. I thought she was lying. I wouldn't go with her. I then decided to call my mother because she would know the truth. I called and luckily she answered and told me that my partner would never do that to me and that I should trust her and go to the hospital. I remember a brief scene in the waiting room trying to tell the person at the desk my personal information. I couldn't remember my name, my social, or what I had taken. Then I remember sitting in a chair and holding my brain in my lap. It was no longer attached to my head. My perspective was from my waist looking up. Then I was planning a meetup with my old friends Phil and Bob again in Disney World. There was a secret floor you can get off on an elevator there on one of the rides that no one knows about. You have to swim underwater to get there. I was in the hospital, but the hospital felt like a jail and I was laying in my bed. The hospital was also located in Disney. I would wait for my friends to get there. This room I was in had a strange familiarity, as if I'd been there one time before. I was alone in a bed with a television and an old-fashioned radio. One wall was barred like a jail cell, and it was nighttime. I caught out of the corner of my eye these tiny moving people. They were my friends there to meet me, along with other people I didn't know. They had shrunk themselves, swam through an underground tunnel, and then taken an elevator into my room. They needed to get something and I helped them by letting them climb across my body. They thanked me by eating the dead skin off my arm on a recent wound that had begun to scab over. They were very happy I had helped them and then went back the way they had came. The next day they visited again. However, this time they were wheeled into my room by an orderly. They stood in a circle on top of a cot, holding curtains around themselves to hide. I entered the curtain to discover they were all nude. They were selling drugs and weapons. Two of them had rats that lived off of their flesh and never left their bodies, like a parasite. They would nest in their pubic hair. They thought it would be exciting to take me on their drug run through the hospital, so they all stood around my bed. This was a carefully orchestrated operation. The orderly was in on the deal, would come retrieve the cot and bring it from unit to unit to sell contraband to the residents. Then I was back in my room at night again. My friend had shrunken themselves and entered my room. They gave me a potion to shrink myself, and we escaped through a crack in the old-fashioned radio. We took an elevator that opened into a body of water. The potion allowed us to breathe underwater, but it only lasted a short while. Under my floor, we surfaced into a secret chamber. This was a secret place where they had a huge stash of drugs hidden. We were going to take the drugs and then go on all the rides in Disney World. Then the cops showed up. We were all interviewed separately by a woman. Phil then turned out to be an officer as well and had to play it off like he was working undercover, even though he was really committing the crime with us. He then tried to interrogate Bob and I about how the drugs got there and pin it on us. We both knew that he supplied the bulk of the drugs. He finally felt so guilty that he broke down in tears and confessed. We were all arrested. At first, Bob fled the scene, but they caught him. They put us in 3 rooms in the top of a building. I kept walking into the wrong room every time I wanted to use the restroom and was reprimanded. They kept saying, "Nope, that's not your room. It's this one right here." Phil and I slept the whole time. However, Bob lost his shit. It turned out he had a mental disability and started screaming nonsense and crying like a baby. I thought it might have been some sort of defense mechanism to deny what was happening around him. I remember being envious that he was able to escape reality and the complete horror when realizing the situation I had gotten into. Drug charges, prison, armed guards. I slept and slept, and then I ate a meal and slept more. Then I wake up and they tell me I'm going home. I am in a hospital. I'm on the phone with my partner and she will be here in a few minutes. I check out of the hospital with a discharge sheet reading psychosis, unspecified type, and to make an appointment with my PCP within 3 days. I was so confused for the first couple of weeks. Writing this has been extremely therapeutic for me. In reality, I was only out of the hospital in psychosis for about 5 hours and then spent the next 4 days in a hospital bed. None of that happened. I was a lunatic, ranting and raving to myself. I am able to find some strength in my mental fortitude. I know that was a delusion. It is feeling more and more like a dream each day that passes. I have been extremely humbled. This experience has changed me forever. I value my sanity and my mental health so much more now. I'm dedicated to finally dealing with my addiction issues and treating my mental and physical health like a temple. Please let this be a warning sign. Meth is a terrible drug, and stimulants in general are playing with fire for anyone with an addictive personality type. My advice is to just stay away. I know I will never touch it again. I had been up for about a week doing meth and heroin, IV route, and I was at a McDonald's off of Hennepin Avenue in Minneapolis. While I was sitting at a table, I became very paranoid, and I heard someone sitting nearby begin to talk about kidnapping and torturing me. I heard little snippets of the conversation, and what stood out to me was, handcuff him and just throw him in the trunk, take him back to the house and teach him a lesson with a blowtorch. What the fuck? I was on a bit of a spree at this time, robbing every heroin dealer I knew with these really amazing fake $50 bills I learned how to make. These things had a watermark and they passed the marker test. It was a really crazy time in my life because it was like having unlimited money, and I was on quite the run. By run, I mean I was heavy binging on all the free drugs I had acquired using this method, so naturally I was paranoid since I had recently ripped off so many people, and it was people that is probably best not to fuck with. This was the state of things in my life at the moment, and I started hearing these crazy things, so I completely freaked out, went into the bathroom and called the police. And for me to call the fucking police of all things, trust me, I was completely terrified. These threats seemed entirely real to me, so real in fact that I still question myself to this day what really happened. I called 911 and said quietly and quickly that I'm at this McDonald's and I'm being threatened and I'm in fear for my life, and hung up. As soon as I hung up, I thought to myself, what the fuck did you just do, dumbass? Are you stupid, dude? You're a criminal with felonies on your record. You've got fake bills and all kinds of drugs on you, and the police are on the way. You better go now. So I got up to leave and I saw the police coming in as I went out the door, and they had no idea who had called at this point, so I just got the hell out of there before they got anything figured out. I still think I'm being followed by these people that want to hurt me at this point, and now I've pissed them off even more by involving law enforcement. My paranoid meth-addled brain was sure that they knew I was the one that got the police to come to the McDonald's. I ran to the closest building to this McDonald's, which happened to be a church that was having a clothing drive for the homeless. At this point, I fit that description. I was rail thin and had been up for days on end wearing the same clothes. I grabbed some clothes off the rack and asked if I could have it, and the lady looked at me sadly and said, "Of course, honey, that's what we're here for today. You can take whatever you need." I felt like I was in a movie now, having changed clothes to throw my kidnappers off my trail. I got out of there and went into some random building that was nearby that I think was some kind of place that helped people find housing. I'm not sure, it's all pretty foggy. Now remember, I was on a lot of drugs at this time. I went in there to do another shot of heroin, hoping it would take the edge off and help me calm down from this wild paranoia. No such luck, they had followed me in. I kept seeing the same group of 4 people following me and just menacingly looking at me, just waiting me out so they can get me alone. I was the prey, they were the hunters. I was so scared at this point, I texted my dad to come and get me. All I said was, "Dad, please help me, I'm in a bad situation, I need you to pick me up." My poor, long-suffering dad was always there for me in a bad situation. I couldn't have asked for a better father. Even though he knew I'd been up to no good, he was always down to come get his son out of trouble. My dad pulled up as my paranoia was getting worse and worse. When I saw his car, I booked it out. I jumped in the front seat and slouched down so my enemies couldn't see me and said to my dad, "They're going to follow us for sure. Go, go!" And my dad didn't hesitate to step on it. He knew I kept some bad company in the past and saw how scared I looked, so he obliged. The whole time I was ducking down and peeking out from behind my seat to check if they were following me, and I was convinced that they were hot on my trail. I told my dad directions to a Starbucks nearby that my friend worked at so I could see her there and grab a Xanax from her to calm me down. We made it to the coffee shop and I was terrified the whole drive, and I ran inside the Starbucks looking sketchy as all hell and saw my friend behind the counter. We'll call her G. I came up looking frantic and said, "G, I'm freaking out. I need a Xan right now, bad." And G, being the absolutely amazing friend that she is, gave me one with no questions asked. This is where the story gets even crazier. After I got the Xan and ate it, I saw a woman wearing a burqa enter the store. There is a large Somali population here in Minneapolis, so there's lots of women wearing burqas around. But to my paranoid mind, this was an assassin disguised as a woman so they can kill me without being seen on camera. So I dove behind the counter at Starbucks cowering in fear, just causing a major scene in front of everyone, including G's manager. Luckily, she explained it away somehow and her job wasn't affected. As the woman came closer, it clicked in my mind that I was mistaken and this was no assassin at all. I apologized to my friend G and just ran the fuck out of that Starbucks. Still scared that my pursuers were outside waiting, I crouched down again and ran back to the car where my dad was at. A few minutes later, my friend G called me and convinced me that the safest place for me was at the hospital and that nobody trying to hurt me was ever going to follow me there. This actually made perfect sense to me, so I told my dad to go to the nearest hospital, which he was happy to do, as he also thought it was a good place for me instead of bringing my cracked out paranoia to the house and scaring the fuck out of my mom. That little piece of advice from G ended up saving my life because I was actually in septic shock at the time, and this was causing severe hallucinations on top of all the meth and lack of sleep. I was actually very, very sick, on death's door, really. I was literally dying. When I got to the hospital, I was admitted for endocarditis, septic shock, and major organ failure. I barely survived. I got there in the nick of time. I was just doing so much heroin and meth at the time, I was numbing my body to the point that I couldn't tell that I was literally about to die. Once the heroin wore off, I was in major pain. I couldn't do anything, not even get up to shit, so I had to do that in a bedpan. God bless those poor nurses that had to help me with that I know for sure that wasn't fun for them. Luckily, the doctor gave me plenty of pain meds to help make me more comfortable, which I was honestly surprised by since I was clearly a drug addict and I'd only been treated like shit at hospitals up until that point for being on drugs. The doctor even put me on methadone so I wouldn't have to suffer withdrawal. Anyway, I ended up staying in the hospital on IV antibiotics to treat the endocarditis for the next 2 months. I am lucky to be alive today, and I barely survived. Thank God for good friends like G. I'm still friends with her to this day. She's my best friend. If it wasn't for her amazing advice to hide from my imaginary kidnappers at the hospital, I wouldn't be here today. She always knows just what to say to calm me down or make me feel better. She's the best. She's also saved my life about 5 times previously when I overdosed. I actually overdosed right before I went to the McDonald's, which shows how reckless I was with my drug use at the time to just keep on trucking even right after an overdose. It was such a real and intense hallucination that it still leaves me questioning what was really going on to this day. The kidnappers may not have been real, but the trauma shooting up drugs left my body with definitely was. I still shudder sometimes when I think about it. I know that was a long-ass story, and if you actually made it to the end, thanks for listening to my rambling thoughts. I hope it wasn't too confusing. Up until age 18, I never ingested drugs. It all started with weed from a friend, then moved on to coke, crack, spice, stimulants, opiates, benzos, and psychedelics. I have done it all except PCP and ketamine. The drug abuse has been extremely severe and uncontrollable, resulting in major kidney, liver, and intestine damage now at age 26. Managing my opiate addiction of 6 years was the worst, but I got on Suboxone in year 5 or 6. When I couldn't tolerate the withdrawals from sub after a year of weaning and attempting to stop 6 times, I quit my job and went on vacation to Florida on August 5th, 2018, and did not get back home until August 19th with my girlfriend who does not use. Before we hopped in the car for the 700-mile drive south, I already had a plan to get high and I hid it from my girl. It was my secret, which did not last. My plug and old buddy in Florida could give me pure blue crystal shards for 80 a gram. Very good quality compared to the crap I see here in North Carolina. I wrestled with the idea, but decided wrong. My addicted brain convinced me that since I was on vacation, I may as well enjoy myself and get high. I deserved it and my mind said yes to it. By using meth, I can kick the Suboxone and stop my opiate problem for good. This plan worked and backfired horribly. Meth did overpower the horrible feelings and sensations of the withdrawal. Meth is so strong it seems to overpower just about 95% of all drugs. This I knew would work and help me, or so I thought. Then I became a meth addict in return upon stopping opiates. Here's my story on the gradual loss of my sanity, which took a mere 14 days of foolish abuse, redosing, and mixing drugs with meth. It all started with buying a whole gram on August 8th, 3 days after we got to Florida. I tried for 3 days to kick subs, but then I caved into my sinister plan of replacing one addiction for another. My plug came by at 12:30 p.m. and sold me the G for $80. We went into the bedroom and prepared my first dose of this cunning poison. I was so excited that my hands started sweating. He prepared a small line for me and I railed it, about a half point from the first bag, and I instantly loved it. My dealer at the time said to be careful and do not ever smoke it, as for you will become a fiend. I did not listen because I was all about the forbidden fruits of life. Just hearing the dangers made me want it more. I exclusively snorted the first bag and did not use any other ROA. I stayed awake for 3 days straight on the first bag. Already then, I forgot what sleeping and eating were like. My use was already out of control. Basic functions like sleeping, hygiene, and family became an afterthought. I was so high and spun from the first batch, I locked myself away from the world because I could not act normal and looked filthy and crazy. After I snorted and ate the whole gram, I ran out and crashed for 1 day. After that, I bought the second gram when I wasn't feeling good from withdrawal. The second gram lasted another 3 days. I found oral dosing under the tongue to be better than most ROAs. I ran out and crashed hard for 2 days in bed, super depressed. The come downs were getting worse. At this point, I already lost major weight. I looked anorexic and sickly from the lack of sleeping every day, and barely eating any food or drinking liquids. I was stuck on a path to utter annihilation, but I caved again. On the 3rd gram purchase, I pushed another binge. 3 binges in 14 days. I slept not even 5 of those days total. My tolerance was also going up because the 3rd gram lasted only 2 days. It seemed like a total waste of dope smoking it, with less bioavailability and easily forgetting how much I was doing. I opened the bag and broke up the giant rock so I can load the pipe. First few times smoking it, I did it wrong, which frustrated me, but I eventually learned. Once I perfected fine art of smoking and twirling the glass, I became infatuated with it. It became my life. Nothing else mattered to me except the ice and glass. I would say smoking crack was horribly fiendish, but out of all of my experiences, smoking meth had the worst pull and grip on my mind. Nothing in life came close to this addiction, and I was hooked. My girl, little puppy, and even myself did not matter until the dope ran out and busted the pipe. I feared for myself of losing it all. I did not realize at the time that I was also losing my mental sanity and perceptions of reality. Smoking ice hit my brain instantly and hard. However, sometimes it had a delayed reaction and would creep up on me. On the 3rd bag, I finished half of it smoking constantly. The pipe was constantly in my hand, going through 3 lighters a day. At this point, my hearing was going haywire from the mental abuse of using meth like an idiot. I heard voices in the wall speaking to me and whispering, talking shit about me and how much of a junkie loser I was. I hallucinated metal songs, old men speaking to each other, and dogs barking when there was none in the household. I heard intense ringing of the ears which changed pitch constantly. My ears were popping and the audio hallucinations kept getting worse. I should have stopped smoking the pipe, and I did. I thought it was a good idea to take a bong rip of pot to relax. I loaded a huge cone and blasted the entire bowl in one hit. It was more weed than I have ever inhaled. My lungs could not feel the smoke at all. I held it in for 20 seconds and exploded the smoke out, coughing my lungs up. All of a sudden, after 2.5 grams of meth over the course of 2 weeks, sleep deprivation on and off, and the mixture of a mild psychedelic, cannabis, my mind snapped for the first time in my life. I entered psychosis, and it was the most terrifying experience I've ever had. My mind became my own worst enemy. It got so bad I considered suicide as an option. It got progressively worse over the course of 4 hours. I walked out of my girlfriend's bedroom at 3:30 a.m. with eerie paranoia of immense danger around me. I was standing in the hallway and heard banging noises outside. I went to the front door to check on the cars. I peered through the glass and saw 5 cops outside, standing, looking at the door. One of the cops, I saw his face peeking straight through the glass, looking into my face directly. I backed away from the window and he held up a pistol to the glass and made a threatening gesture with a sinister smile. I backed away from the front door and turned off all the lights, grabbed a butcher knife and ran into the bathroom. The house was dead silent. All of a sudden I heard radio chatter on a police radio. They were talking outside and I heard them through 3 walls in the middle of a household. They said they were breaking in shortly to the suspected meth house. I hid in the bathroom, terrified for who knows how long. After a short while, I walked out of the bedroom into the living room with the knife in my hand, walking on my tippy toes into the darkness. I thought they could hear my footsteps on the soft carpet, so I was moving very slow from the small bathroom where I felt safe. They disappeared and I was freaking out more now, thinking they went to the back of the house to enter inside. It was dead silent again. I heard an intense buzzing sound in the walls around me suddenly. The room morphed and breathed with psychedelia, and I heard sounds of electricity buzzing, hard to explain the sound. I gripped the massive knife tight, hands sweating so much, beads were dripping onto the blade. It was too quiet and I anticipated trouble, eyes wide open and tweaked into a delusional, homicidal state. I walked back into the living room and turned a lamp on to see. I looked around and felt okay, but then seconds later I suddenly heard an extremely realistic, vivid, and terrifying sound. I heard a window breaking in the kitchen 15 feet away. It sounded incredibly real. The window sounded like it was kicked in with a shoe. I heard the glass fall and hit the tile floor in the kitchen, then heard a man grunt as he pulled himself through the window. I heard feet hit the floor and glass crunch under his body weight. My face dropped and my hand gripped the knife so hard I had bruises on my hand. I ran back in the bathroom and turned off the light with the door cracked slightly. I thought at this point someone was going to die, and it was up to me to save everyone in the house sleeping soundly. I hid in the bathroom and heard 2 men in the house talking to each other, saying to grab this item to steal. The other man said he was going back towards the bedrooms. He had to get through me, as for the bathroom was right in the path of where he was headed. I heard footsteps silently and carefully approaching around the corner from the kitchen where the window was busted in. I was sweating profusely, shaking, my heart dropped, and the knife felt like an extension of my own body. I knew this was it. Rather I die from a home invasion, or I murder for the first time. I could not exit the bathroom for fear I was going to get shot and killed. I held my breath and crunched down in the darkness, peering out in the hall with the door cracked, ready to pounce. I stayed in the bathroom concealed in the darkness for quite some time. I exited the bathroom and peered around a few corners, squat walking to make my body target smaller so I did not get shot suddenly. It took me 50 minutes to make sure the tiny house was clear, and in reality, it was. Nothing happened at all. I hallucinated a home invasion at 3:30 a.m. It was completely real to me, but it did not end there. I woke up my girlfriend and made her check the house. She said I was tweaking too hard. I did not believe her. I hit the pipe more and started convulsing. My chest and head had severe pains from the high blood pressure, and I could not stop moving, breathing extremely fast. I considered the hospital, but I couldn't do it again. I had no weed and could not calm down. I decided to go out for a walk to breathe fresh air. Huge mistake. I entered the realm of hell with the shadow people for the first time. It was not a friendly experience. It was 4:30 a.m. I carefully exited the house. I was in a full, thick body sweat, eyes blown. I had hypothermia, was starving, and dehydrated. I was so spun, all I had on was my shorts and a shirt, no shoes. I started walking a block and was walking very quickly. I made it 500 feet and turned a corner. The hallucinations went from audio to visual. As I turned left to another road, I saw dozens of black cats and dogs running across the street in front of me. A man peered out from behind a bush. I couldn't tell if it was real due to the psychosis intensifying, and my mental state turned for the worse due to seeing that one shadow man appearing. I became hostile and more paranoid. I ended up getting lost, despite only wanting to walk a few blocks. I knew the neighborhood well but could not think clearly. I lost track of time and location and was increasingly desperate to get home. It seemed darker than usual outside. I looked at my phone and the screen was so bright I had to put it away. With Waze on my phone, I could not articulate a thought to help me and gave up. Walking in the middle of the road at 5:30 a.m., suddenly lights and the sound of a car were approaching from behind. I saw red, green, and white vivid lights on the ground in front of my body, getting brighter as the vehicle approached me and the sound of a car engine running. My back was turned. It did not dare turn around for fear of cops. The car stopped feet behind me and I stopped walking, gripping the huge kitchen knife in my waistband. I heard 3 doors open and close to the car. A man called out my name and said to turn around. I held my concealed knife and I turned and nothing was there. I could not believe how crazy the hallucinations were becoming. But it was not over. It got even worse. The most terrifying episode I ever imagined or experienced. It seemed all too real, and I couldn't handle the paranoia anymore. I dropped the knife and was too paranoid from cops showing up. After walking around in a circle for another 30 minutes getting more lost, I finally found a street nearby the house. I found my way and was only 2,000 feet from the front door. My shirt was completely drenched in sweat. I took it off and wrung it out, sweat spilling onto the street. I left my shirt off and carried it in hand. I started speed walking faster. I turned a corner and was so close to home. This is when the most intense fear of my life got triggered. It gave me PTSD, I believe, and I will never forget what I saw and the intense fear. I will never forget, scarred into my brain forever from sheer terror. It was like Satan raped my mind and soul, a sense of pure evil and hostility. I was high, but I was panicking, fearful, and desperate to escape my mind. I just could not do it. All of a sudden, I heard doors to homes opening and closing. The homes were behind me only, not in front of the path I was on to the house. I turned around to see and froze from fear. Black shadow people calmly walked out of their homes one at a time, one person from each house. After each one came out, they stood on their driveways. They faced me and did not speak or move, only glared. They only glared with a hostile, evil feel to each one of them. I started walking in reverse facing them. The panic exploded into full, incredibly horrific fear. The shadow people started walking towards me, and behind them, dozens more started running out of each house. The shadow people I saw had bright red, demonic eyes and evil-spirited feeling. Then I noticed the ones running had 2 massive knives in each of their hands, the same knife I had from before. They all started chasing, running full sprint. I locked eyes with one of them before I started running full speed down the street, only a few hundred feet from home. I tossed my shirt onto the grass and screamed. I screamed in pure terror, and I was running faster than I ever ran in my life. I felt like I was running 30 miles per hour. While extremely stimmed, I could have had a heart attack or stroke. I did not care. Fight or flight mode mixed with psychosis made me believe I was going to be brutally murdered and sent to hell. My body was sweating so much I couldn't even see. My eyes were covered in sweat droplets, but I did not stop running. I was so scared I cried while sprinting, thinking this was it. I am going to die and I cannot escape this nightmare. I wanted to commit suicide to end the mental anguish. If I had a gun, I would have. But my desire to live overcame me and I made it to the front door in less than a minute since I was close nearby. I slammed the door behind me and the shadow people ran up. Dozens of them covered the front lawn and driveway. They stood motionless as I looked through the glass, and I saw a sea of glowing red, sinister eyes staring me down. Just as I was looking at them, they all disappeared into the air in the form of a black wispy smoke, except one. The one singular shadow person walked straight up to the window, stared me straight in the eyes from inches away with just a thin window frame blocking him from me. The shadow then got even closer and came through the glass and into me. All of a sudden, I got down on my hands and knees and could not breathe. I felt my body being entered or exited from an external force I could not describe even to this day. After a few minutes, I got up and the psychosis lessened. The paranoia remained and I did not sleep that night. I stayed in the house and did not dare to leave again. I did not redose anything and just stopped. I was too afraid. To this day, 4 months later, I have an intense fear of darkness, walking around neighborhoods at night, no matter how safe. I have an aversion to knives and I'm shut in even more so than before. I fear that the panic and terror I endured gave me lasting mental scars and irrational fears. If I decide to use meth now, I get psychosis from not even using 0.25 with just meth alone. Psychosis appears to become easier to achieve as time goes on. Abstinence from drugs is the only thing that helps, and life is truly better without meth. Mixing large amounts of it with cannabis appears to trigger psychosis, or make it much worse if it's already occurring. As fun as it is, and amazing as it was never worth putting in my body. I talked briefly about this in another thread the other day, and it had been a long time since I had thought about it, so I thought it may help someone if I tell this story. This happened to me almost 20 years ago now. 20 years later, it's still vivid in my mind. It was so traumatic. The backstory. In 1998, I moved from smoking pot to doing crystal methamphetamine. I remember the first few times. I felt like God. I felt like I discovered some secret, that the rest of humanity were weaker beings needing to sleep. I was full of life, full of confidence and social. When I ended the nights out and went home, I'd lie there so wired I couldn't even blink. In my head running over fantasy scenarios and dreaming whilst awake. Dawn would come and I'd drift off to sleep. I had dropped out of work and was living off benefits, which I used completely to buy crystal. It felt so good. This carried on for a while. I got confident, got a girlfriend. I hadn't had one for a few years. Anyway, my confidence spiraled into egotistical wankerdom. I believed the grains of white crystal I held in my pocket were magic. Then one night, this illusion swung violently into a nightmare. That night, I hadn't slept or eaten anything proper in days. I was wired to fuck already. I met my girlfriend, who in reality was a drugged up skank from a rough family, and we went to this shitty local pub she liked. I went into the toilets thinking, this place is shit, I'll liven it up a bit. I took out my baggie and proceeded to bomb double what I usually took. It seemed to hit almost instantly. I was in the cubicle, and the rush was pure terror and anxiety. I sat there and heard a few guys come into the toilet. They were talking about me. They were plotting to beat me up. I sat there with my heart pounding and eyes bulging, thinking, what will I do? What will I do? I go out cautiously, and there's nobody there. I go into the pub area, and my mates are playing pool and drinking. I try to pretend I'm okay, but it must have been so obvious I wasn't. As one of my friends commented, you need to calm down on that stuff. My girlfriend said, let's get out of here, you look crazy. So we went to her house, which was just over the road. She said, I'll make you a brew to help you calm down. I sat there and my mind was racing. She was in on it. I never drink brews. She was trying to poison me or slip me some downers so the people in the pub could beat me up. I sat in the lounge on my own, and looking around, I saw some tools her dad had out. He was installing laminate floor. There was a hammer and a few other bits. Then I saw it, a retractable Stanley knife. I picked it up quietly and slipped it into my pocket, not even thinking what the fuck I was going to do. I just knew if these fuckers came, I was going to defend myself. My girlfriend came in and gave me the brew. I put it down and obviously didn't drink that poison shit. The curtains were drawn, but I saw the shadows outside of a group of people. They were coming. I needed to get the fuck out of there. My girlfriend starts coming on to me. I pretended I was into it. Then, seizing the element of surprise, I push her off, jump up, and shoot out of her house. I sprinted the fastest I have ever ran. Her house overlooked some fields at the back that led onto the woods. I just ran and ran and ran. Once I was a good distance away, I looked back and they were coming. I saw them coming, fast, so I turned and carried on sprinting. On that night, I think I'd have given Usain Bolt a run for his money. I reached the woods and literally felt sick at the thought of going in. It must have been about midnight now, and it was pitch black. There was no place else to go. I hurdled the fence and ran in. I found a densely overgrown spot and hid behind a tree, my heart pounding in my chest. My hand in my pocket slid out the blade of the knife. I stayed quiet for what seemed like hours. I saw them, their dark silhouettes and hooded heads. They looked big, like bodybuilder types, and there were loads of them. I heard them whistle to each other in some sort of code. Then, the worst thing ever happened. The clouds cleared and the full moon shone bright light down, illuminating the woods and revealing where I was. I saw them moving between trees. They were playing a game. They were hunting me. Just get it over with. What have I done to you? Why are you doing this? I screamed into the dark. But still, they didn't come. They just sort of circled around me in the woods. My mind raced to every person I might have pissed off, to think who could be behind this. I knew whoever it was, to have this many people out here in the woods, they were serious. Come on, come and do it then. I've got a fucking knife. I literally screamed into the dark woods. It was probably now about 2 a.m. The shadows just kept darting between trees, only now they looked small. Not even my height, I'm not very tall. The moon had gone back behind the clouds, but then, all of a sudden, a bright white beam came down from the moon to the middle of the woods. My mind then, and I remember with clarity, thought, I cannot believe this is an alien conspiracy. Oh my god, I'm going to be abducted. I'll disappear and no one will ever know what happened. It sounds ludicrous in hindsight, but the terror I felt in that moment. I pulled out the knife. I thought, no, I'd rather fucking kill myself than be taken by aliens. The time now must have been about 4 a.m. because it literally started to grow lighter. I looked around in horror, the blade of the Stanley knife to my wrist. It was like my whole soul screamed no. The light came fast. I looked around. There was no one, no beings, no people, just me. I was freezing. My eyes were literally bulging out of my skull. A moment of clarity came smashing through all the horror. I collapsed to my knees and looked at myself. I was covered in mud. I'd actually cut into my arm and blood ran down my hand. I was filthy. I sat there with my head in my hands, crying for ages. What had my life become? I pulled myself up and walked home. All the way, paranoid thoughts rushed through my head. People in cars stared at me. Men in white vans were going to pull up and bundle me into them. The reality was, it was about 5 a.m. There were hardly any cars about. The bad trip lingered. I had to force myself not to look at the shadow people. I remember one vividly leaning on the bonnet of a car, cradling a baseball bat. I forced myself to look down and just get home. Now, the reality that it was a bad trip was a thought I could understand. I felt distraught. I got home, got into bed, and slept for 2 full days. I got up after that 48 hours, and I made a serious attempt to kill myself. My mom found me unconscious. I was in hospital for 3 days. I woke up, discharged myself, and you know what? I went and scored some more meth. Please, if you are young or any age, don't do that shit. It is evil. It is the worst, most horrible thing. It will make you do terrible things to people you love. It will make you do terrible things to yourself. It's just not worth it. I want to add something to the story that I missed. I had a best friend from back then. He too went through a lot of what I did. We were best friends, but the meth eroded that as we each began shutting down. I saw him a few months ago, the first time in about 15 years. It was all good. When I commented on how crazy it was back then, he was walking off in his own direction and turned and said exactly the truth. It always stays with you, and it does. This experience happened towards the end of July in 2024, and I only now decided to write out a trip report because I feel I've never heard of a meth psychosis on the same level as what I experienced, and people need to be warned just how horrifying this drug can be. I was a drug addict for 3 years at this point, trying whatever I could find and loving it, but mostly enjoyed benzodiazepines, weed, and opioids to a lesser degree, since those were more expensive and harder to come across. When I started doing drugs, I took a harm reduction approach to everything I did. Even though I was addicted, I made sure to space out doses of certain drugs and only take certain amounts. By the start of June, this approach was slowly but quickly going out of the window. I was taking lots of Xanax every other day and taking extremely high doses of edibles every single day, plus dabbling in opioids, Vyvanse, Ritalin, you name it. By July, my life had begun totally falling apart. Everything felt meaningless. All I was concerned about was getting the next re-up. I give this backstory to set the scene for why I did what I did. I had a plug who sent high-quality drugs in the mail at a cheap price, and he had everything you could have asked for besides heroin. I had been ordering from him since I think February, but my memory is very foggy for most of this year. He had meth on his menu since I first started talking to him, which is a drug I always told myself I would never try. Now I was just thinking, hell, it's just a stronger and cheaper version of Adderall, so why not? I ordered an eighth of meth from him, along with the gram of MDMA, Suboxone strips, and 20 fentanyl M30s, which was the first time I ever knowingly bought fentanyl ever intending to try it. Eventually, my order came in the mail, and I opened it with excitement and found that everything was there that I asked for. Either that night or the next, I tried my first bump of meth. I refused to smoke it because I had a collapsed lung earlier in the year and figured meth smoke would cause it to collapse again. The first bump didn't cause me to feel very much, but the second bump sure did. I felt like I was on top of the world, like I was thinking every thought I could possibly think, but at the same time, not thinking at all. I felt like I could do everything. I was so incredibly energized. I was up a full 24 hours because I remember thinking, wow, it does keep you up 24 hours, before doing my next dose. For the next 2 straight days, I was doing bumps every couple hours, or probably even more often than that. One night, I tried to calm myself down and let myself sleep using Xanax, but I discovered that taking Xanax with meth just makes you feel both types of high at the same time, which was a feeling so good it distracted me from me trying to sleep. The second day of this whole shit show was a school day, and my school only goes for 3 hours a day and no Fridays because it's an alternative school. It's extremely laid back and such a small school that everybody knows everybody. I'm explaining this to say that when I hallucinated at school that it was time to go by looking at the clock on my phone, I was able to just walk out the front doors, get in my car, and drive down the parking lot before I realized nobody else had left, and I hadn't been to 2 classes still. That night was when all hell broke loose. At about 2 a.m. that night, I decided in my twacked out mind to do all the rest of the meth I had. It was at least 2 grams. I chopped it up into long thin lines on a dinner plate and did them one by one, surprised at how I didn't feel the powder hurting my nose the slightest. By 3 a.m., I had finished all the meth and I was feeling incredible. Then by 6 a.m. when the sun came back up, I started seeing a bunch of rats running along the edges of my walls and on my desk. Then I looked under my bed and looked at a backpack, but I saw a raccoon. This terrified me, so I called my partner to talk loudly about the raccoon and the rats. My dad could hear me, of course, and so he came up and asked me what the fuck was going on, and I pointed at the raccoon, and he became concerned for me. I managed to convince him I had just taken too many edibles, and he said he believed me, but looking back, of course, he knew something was very wrong. Later that day, he drove me to school because I was in no state to drive, and I brought my whole bottle of Xanax. At the last class of the day, the teachers had noticed I'd been acting fucked up, though I don't remember much from that, and I was called to the principal's office. He knew I was high. I told him it was only weed and Xanax, and he had my bag searched, and they found my Xanax and confiscated it. He called my dad to come pick me up and take me to the hospital, and this is where the next 3 straight days of hallucinations and delusions really began. My dad was sitting with me in the hospital room, and I kept on hearing him say things to me he wasn't saying. I kept on asking him if he said something. He denied it, and I kept saying, "I'm losing my mind." Then some hours later, they decided they had to take me to a bigger hospital, and the hallucinations ramped up to an 11. When I was in the ambulance, the wall to the right of me was this giant glass display case with shelves, and each shelf had severed human heads talking to me and talking shit about me to each other. To my left was a paramedic asking me questions. The whole ambulance was covered in blood, and there was blood sloshing around on the floors as well. I remember the paramedic asking me if I do drugs, and I said no, which I knew was a lie. Then he asked me if I was tripping right now, and I said no, which I thought was the truth. Then he had some tablet which could have been real or not, and he was showing it to me, and I somehow gathered by reading what I saw on the tablet that I was wanted for 7 counts of murder, and they must be taking me to the hospital for a short time because I have to go to court. If I had to go over every single little hallucination and delusion I had, we'd be here for hours, so I'm going to write about 3 major events. First event was the night I thought I was in 3 shootings back to back to back. The first shooting, I thought I was at a party with kids from my school. I thought all the machines were people standing in my room, and they were annoying me because they kept talking shit about me. I thought we were outside in the woods or somebody's backyard. Eventually, I felt I had to move from my hospital bed to a chair across the room because I was so pissed off. When I moved to that chair, I thought the machine directly behind me was a person holding a shotgun to the back of my head. I was terrified and was trying not to make a move. The nurse came over to ask me what was wrong, and I thought it would be dangerous to mention the shooter in front of the shooter. I thought we had to pretend he wasn't there. Eventually, I asked my nurse to let me in the bathroom, and I kept on asking him to come in with me, and he did. Once inside, I asked him what we should do about the shooter, and obviously he had no fucking clue what I was talking about. Later, I hallucinated the cops coming in and tackled the shooter to the ground. The second shooting I hallucinated, I was at my school. I hallucinated there were actually 2 shooters hiding in different places in my room. I noticed one of the shooters. He was under the bed with a gun like a sniper rifle. Not too much to talk about with that one because I don't remember much, but I remember seeing police officers come and take out the 2 shooters somehow. The next last shooting was unforgettable. I hallucinated I was taken to some kind of drug house out in the sticks 10 minutes away from my school. The nurse I had, who was a different nurse from the first shooting, was the drug dealer. My IV stand was a bald guy in a gray suit with a gun. He would turn and switch positions, the gun pointing at my nurse, then the ceiling, then the wall behind me, then me, then the nurse, and it was some sort of game he was playing with us where I had to breathe properly, and if I didn't, he would kill us both. What was actually happening was my nurse was trying to get me to breathe deeply since my heart rate was up to 160, and breathing techniques bring your heart rate down. Eventually, when the man in the gray suit had his gun facing to the floor, I took the chance to tackle him down, ripping out my IV without me even realizing it, and running out of my hospital room down the hall to escape from him. They brought me back to my room, and I kept on talking about how ridiculous the gun problems are in our country, where we had 3 shootings in the same night in the same general location, and how we needed to do something about this. This led to the second major event of my stay. I decided I needed to run for president. I was talking to nurses nonstop about it. I wrote a whole speech about what I wanted to do as president and hallucinated I was at some sort of press conference to deliver my speech. I had nurses cover up my IVs and things because I didn't want to appear sick for the people showing up to my speech. I saw yard signs for my campaign out the small window next to the door of my room and figured lots of people had shown up to see my speech. I hallucinated 5 people, including the dictator of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. He came in to hear my speech after I'd practiced my speech literally all day. I ended up doing my speech without missing a word and was proud of myself, and the people there to watch me began clapping. After that, the doctors gave me some sort of benzodiazepine to get me to sleep, and I agreed. I needed lots of sleep for the upcoming rallies I would have to do. The last major event I want to highlight was one night I hallucinated I was in my cousin's house on his couch, and I thought the nurse was one of my cousin's friends. I hallucinated that the nurse kept smoking weed, playing video games, and taking pills. More than 10 times that night, I hallucinated armed intruders breaking into my cousin's house and the nurse having to fight them off, telling me to remain as quiet as possible so I wasn't seen by them. This just happened non-stop, with new intruders coming over and over and over again, each time scarier than the last. Then, one morning, the hallucinations had gone, and I pretended to wake up after pretending to be asleep all night and explained to the nurse everything I had been through, including my presidential campaign, the shootings, and the home invasions. She said one thing to me, which just shocked me. "What are you talking about?" I had been told I was saying nonsense the whole time I'd been at the hospital, but this morning was the first morning I was receptive to it. The hallucinations had subsided, and I eventually realized through talking to nurses and my dad that the last 3 days of my life had been a living nightmare, full of terrifying hallucinations and delusions. I was placed in an 8-week treatment program right after I left the hospital, and I have been sober ever since. Today I'm 4 months and 22 days, and I still sometimes hear the Xanax, weed, and even meth calling me back. Please, never ever use this drug. I have to give a warning before you go any farther. This story depicts very grotesque things happening to these people. If you get grossed out easily, I'd click away right now. There's also mention of some abuse too, so if you can't handle that either, please click away now. Thank you. I am writing about my experiences with meth for 2 reasons. Firstly, my husband and I were able to remain healthier than most by doing relatively easy things with homeopathic remedies and over-the-counter meds that I'd like to relay to others who are using heavily. And secondly, I feel that perhaps if I honestly relate the grotesque and extremely frightening things that happen to us, I might be able to save those who have just begun the long farewell of the hunger strike. We first smoked meth on New Year's Eve because we heard it was great for sex. I had to work the next day, so I saved some to smoke before work in the morning. When I got home, another gram was waiting for me, and I smoked every day but one until we finally quit 6 weeks ago, March 20th. For 3 weeks, we smoked meth with little consequence. Then my skin became fragile, and in addition to breaking out, started to swell. I was really worried because I was constantly thirsty and drinking water, but I rarely urinated. I was afraid I was fucking up my kidneys and I'd be too sick to keep using. So I started taking 1 Pamprin, over the counter for PMS, every other day because it contained a diuretic and a Aleve for swelling as needed. That worked for a week or so. Then I had to take 2 Pamprin every day, then 3, until I realized my skin had become clay-like, for lack of a better word, as if there were a layer of Play-Doh beneath it. I also noticed a powdery black substance, like dirt, was coating my skin, no matter how often I washed it away. We used a lot of mineral oil for massage during sex, or before sex, or after sex. Anyway, one day, I realized this black crap was literally pouring out of my husband's skin, from every pore, and not only his, but mine as well. We guessed that this was some toxin from the speed needing to be eliminated from the body, and figured out that it could be massaged out with oil, or was released when we were hot and sweaty. We started using the sauna at our fitness center in the apartment complex where we live to try and rid our bodies of the toxins, so we wouldn't have to quit doing meth. But despite how often and long we sat in the steam, we couldn't get rid of the swelling or the black shit in our skin. Then my kidneys started hurting, and his, 2 days later. I had lost 20 pounds in 2 months, and my husband had lost 30. And we'd read somewhere that rapid weight loss can cause kidney failure, or maybe we just thought it made sense that if you lost that much fat, it had to leave the body somehow, and our kidneys just couldn't handle it. I was so afraid of what I was doing to myself, but I still didn't want to quit, and I was too afraid to go to a doctor to find out how bad it really was. At some point during a sauna, I noticed a whitish or grayish substance, similar to vegetable shortening, was coming from my skin in massive amounts, tablespoons of it at a time, looking like Play-Doh through a garlic press. I lost 8 pounds in an hour in the sauna of retained fluid and the shortening crap that built up under my skin, which I can only guess was the fat I was burning. We maintained like this, sitting in the steam 3 or 4 times a day for an hour, swelling in between badly enough to cause bruising where the pressure built up. I slept every 3 or 4 days for an hour or so, and woke feeling rested. I would get weak and shaky and realize I'd eaten nothing in 48 hours. I had to keep a chart and check off at least 1 meal a day, plus a multivitamin, plus a protein bar. My scalp would swell up, and I'd run my fingers across it, which would release enough fluid to make my hair wet. I kept having this feeling of waking up as if I'd been asleep or unconscious, only I'd either be at work, standing up, or driving. It was like I checked out for a few minutes and was totally confused upon checking back in about where I was or what I was doing or how long I'd been gone. It was like my brain rebooted, and I had to figure out what the fuck was going on really fast, because I seemed to be in the middle of helping a customer, and he is looking at me strangely. And oh, there's a credit card receipt printing out, so I better hand it to him, and pretend that I was just waiting for it the whole time. And God, I hope I didn't just stop talking in the middle of a sentence, or say something that didn't make any sense, because I've done that before, but only when I was at home alone with my husband. Just say thank you and have a nice day. And we did not want to quit. So we took our saunas and our vitamins and used preparation H for swelling and hydrocortisone for what we guessed was a heat rash. We took oral steroids, prednisone, which I'd been prescribed for asthmatic bronchitis but never took, to try and reduce the swelling. We massaged the shortening from each other's skin and forgot to eat and sleep. We fell asleep with burning cigarettes and with the meth pipe in our hands. I spilled boiling meth on my husband, and he, who had never been violent before in 5 years, hit me for the first time and left bruises on my arm. He hit me again because he couldn't find his keys and left a bruise on my face. He could never find his keys. I started hiding little stashes of shards and forgot where they were, and he hit me when I couldn't find the dope. I was an hour late for work every day. My husband wrecked the truck 3 times. And we didn't want to quit. I forgot to feed my son one day. All we ever did anymore was fight and fuck. Thank God my son was in daycare because they fed him twice a day. He spent the rest of the time watching TV in the living room while we locked ourselves in the bedroom, and he'd have to knock to use the bathroom, which we'd yell at him for doing. I'd send him to school in the same clothes 3 days in a row. I didn't care anymore. No one made sure my son went to bed, and he started acting up at school because he'd been up till 2 a.m., which we yelled at him for doing. I fell asleep during sex, or worse, fell sideways into a dream state while semi-awake, and I'd babble incoherently while we were fucking, but goddamn it felt good. Exquisite. I said it felt exquisite. Everything was either the highest of highs or the lowest of lows. No in between existed anymore. I had delusions, especially when I was hot. I would take the hottest showers I could stand, for hours, trying to clean the cysts I now had under my scalp full of the gritty black shit. And it was difficult because I couldn't use soap anymore. It got under my skin and burned and bubbled in my eyes, nose, and throat for hours afterward. I couldn't drink soda either, same reason. I had delusions that my dealer was poisoning our dope because he wanted it all for himself, which in comparison to my other delusions makes sense. I had delusions that the black shit in my skin was some new form of dope, only producible by the human body, and my dealer was selling us tainted dope so my body would make it because he was going to come harvest the shit from me,
and turned me into a slave he would keep locked up and just feed meth in order to obtain this new drug. I figured my dealer was doing this to lots of people and that he'd keep me enslaved until I died from the meth. I knew it was killing me. I didn't care, and we didn't want to quit. We were banned from the sauna at our apartment complex because no one else could use it. Our sweat smelled so strongly of ammonia, it burned the eyes. It was caustic, and it burned our skin too. We had to cope with just taking really hot showers, which didn't work as well. I fell asleep in the hot shower one night and woke with blood pounding in my ears and too weak to stand up. The fatty shortening crap that built up under my skin seemed to melt enough to be excreted through my pores with little heat, but with a lot of heat, it seemed to melt enough for it to be all released because I was sitting in a pool of it. I gathered the strength to turn on cool water and then realized I made a terrible mistake when all of this crap that was still in my body had collected because of gravity in my pelvic region and belly suddenly congealed. It hurt really bad and I really had to pee, but I couldn't because a clot of it had congealed in my urethra. I eventually pushed it out and saw it in the toilet. Did I promise you grotesque? We aren't through yet. For days afterward, the shit came out of my eyes, ears, nose, and throat. It came out of my vagina. It was in my urine and feces. I swallowed it down continually and it made me gag. I spit constantly because it was in my mouth. I wiped it from my eyes and it ran from my nose. I still have no idea what it was exactly, only a guess that it had something to do with the almost 50 pounds total I had lost. I knew it wasn't a hallucination because I cleaned it out of the tub 3 weeks ago, and 6 weeks after quitting, it's still coming out of my skin. Less, much less, but still there. And I still didn't want to quit. I got lucky. My dealer got popped, and I crashed before I could hook up through anyone else. I slept for 3 days straight, and then dealt with the worst of the withdrawals with coke, which I would not recommend because it works about as well as caffeine, which is to say, not very well. My husband and I haven't done any drugs at all for 4 weeks, and things are slowly going back to normal. I find that Benadryl works well for the withdrawals. I just take as directed for a few days and sleep through it. My son is happy, he has his mother back, and his daddy plays with him again. I'm happy because I'm not so afraid anymore, not afraid of my husband, or of dying painfully in the near future. We are happy because we've nearly paid all the bills we neglected and have cable TV again. We are happy because we resemble the normal, healthy family we once were. But I still want it. I can't sleep tonight because I want it. I wrote this, in all honesty, mostly to help myself, to remind myself why I don't want it. And I still want it.
In 2018, my life seemed great. Me and my boyfriend were doing great. We got our first apartment with our 2 kids. I was on Lexapro for anxiety and depression for 2 years. I can confidently say I never missed a dose. I even took it during pregnancy. Well, I was feeling great, so I decided to stop taking it without any medical help. I tapered down by taking it Monday, skipping it Tuesday, taking it Wednesday, and skipping it altogether. First huge mistake. During this time, I met a pretty cool neighbor. We bonded over that our kids were the same age, 5 and 1. It was during the summer, so our oldest kids were on summer break. I would go to her apartment every morning, and we would smoke weed. What I liked about her is that we would take turns smoking each other out. We would even talk about me watching her kids while she was at work since I was a stay-at-home mom. So one night, me and my family were walking to our apartment after a birthday party. She texted me to come over to smoke. I was kind of confused because we would only hang out in the morning while she was getting ready for work. I trusted her, she was my friend, right? Second huge mistake. After I got everything settled at home, I headed over to her apartment. She was out on her balcony and she didn't allow me to come inside, so I had to hop over. She gave me my own joint and didn't want any of my weed. She just wanted us to smoke her stuff. I started smoking, kind of weirded out with everything going on. I legit thought I was being paranoid since I was officially off my meds for a week. I don't remember anything after that until 11:30 the next morning. I don't remember going home. I don't remember getting to bed. I don't remember getting up with the kids. Nothing. I was FaceTiming my boyfriend while he was on a lunch break. For some reason, I thought he was going to ask me to marry him. Then after he made it clear he wasn't, I was convinced my stepdad was going to ask my mom. I started texting my mom really weird things. I thought my phone knew what I was saying in my head since it has the suggestions. After the call, I was on the couch with my kids and little sister, and I was thinking the TV was talking to me, and I was trying to talk to my sister about it, but I was freaking her out. Then my brain told me that I didn't deserve to have 2 daughters, and my neighbor deserves my youngest. Mind you, I haven't really talked to this neighbor, just a hi bye since we had a huge language barrier. She had 2 sons. I remember my mind just racing and hearing everything. I was even hearing car doors closing from the parking lot. I was walking down my steps to the neighbor's apartment and I knocked on her door and she answered very confused, and I put my daughter down and pushed her into her house. I went back to my apartment and my sister was really worried about my daughter, asking what happened, where is she? I just stood in the middle of the living room. I thought I was replying to her, but I was replying to her in my head. The next thing I remember is standing at the neighbor's balcony and my mouth being so dry. I was holding my daughter and talking with the neighbor and her friend who speaks English. I looked over and saw my mom walking towards us. She took my daughter and started walking up to my apartment and told me to get inside. I looked at my neighbor and said, "Whose mom's is this?" in a New York accent. The English-speaking one laughed and said, "That's your mom. Go follow her." In my apartment, I was trying to clean. My mom was asking questions like, what am I on? What happened? And what am I wearing? I was wearing boxer briefs, a big pickle Rick shirt, and no bra. I would never go outside without a bra, but for some reason, that question pissed me off, and I took off my shirt and threw it at her. She got on the phone and was talking to someone, and I asked her who she was talking to, and she didn't answer me. I'm not sure if I was really talking or doing that thing I was doing to my sister. It made me so mad that she was ignoring me, so I attacked her. Somehow we ended up outside and I hit her a few times and took her phone and hung it up and went back into my apartment. I attacked my mom with no bra and no shirt outside with everyone still there. Next thing I remember was a very dominant voice telling me to put my shirt back on, so I did. Then the voice was asking me what I was on, and I jokingly said, "The only drug I'm on is weed, if you know what I mean," and I hit his shoulder in a joking way. Next thing I know, I am face down on my couch being arrested. I was placed in an SUV police car. There were so many police officers there. I then remember my daughter sitting next to me, and it feeling so hot. This was July in Arizona. The cop didn't turn on the AC. I tried to get their attention, but they were all too busy talking to each other. My daughter was going to die, so I panicked and started hanging my head on the divider. After me banging my head, the cop finally came into the car and yelled at me to stop. I yelled back and told him he's going to kill my daughter. He turned on the truck and continued talking to the other officers. Next thing I remember was making it to jail. I was asking for water and they told me it was in the toilet. That really grossed me out. I drank until I almost threw up. I was called to a desk to talk to a lady. As I was walking out the cell, I came to realize I was the only black person there. I do have a Hispanic last name, so I freaked out and started screaming that I was a legal citizen and to take me home for me to get my social security card. Everyone just looked at me. I was talking to the lady at the desk, but I was so paranoid, I thought they were going to ship me out to Mexico. She was getting irritated and said she'll have to talk to me once I calmed down. The officer told me to sit next to the only lady in the waiting room. There were about 16 guys and just us 2 girls. I took my mugshot and was taken with the lady to get searched. I begged the officer to not touch my breast, and she did. I was taken to another cell. I was by myself, and there was a phone in there with bondsman numbers and whatnot. I was trying to call my mom, but it wasn't going through. There was an officer walking back and forth, and every time I tried talking to her, she ignored me. I decided I was going to get her attention by exposing my breast. When I did that, those guys from before from outside the door acted like they haven't seen a breast before. The officer got so angry and covered the window with the trash bag. That's when everything just went crazy. I laid down on that dirty-ass floor and started kicking the door. I was screaming that I was going to kill myself. At that moment, I felt like a child. Next thing I remember was being in the observation room. I was so scared because this room was exactly what my mom described when I was a kid and being bad. It was a crazy house where there's nothing but a hole in the floor to pee in. I was completely naked with nothing but a gross stuffed blanket. At this point, I was seeing shadow people. These people were my family. The two taller ones was my mom and sister, and the other two were my kids. I was trying to get them to let me out. I ended up getting a hold of my younger daughter in the blanket and was rocking back and forth telling her it was okay. I started hearing my dad talking to me, telling me I did something bad and I need to fix it. I have never talked to my dad in my life, so I don't know how I was talking to him. I believed him. I was crying and telling my daughter I am so sorry. Every so often, someone would open the small window and ask if I was okay, and before I'd say anything, they would shut it. I started reliving my assaults as a child in early 20s. It was playing over and over. I felt like a 5-year-old again. I completely forgot about this stuff, and I thought what I did remember was a movie or something. These flashbacks made me remember what I was making myself forget. Out of nowhere, a lady opened the door and told me I am leaving. I screamed and cried and told them I can't go to Mexico. I don't know Spanish. She grabbed me. The next thing I remember was being in a little room with medical stuff. They took my mouth swab and was trying to take my fingerprints. I kept moving my hands for them to not get it, but the lady death gripped my hand to get a good reading. Next thing I remember was standing in a hallway with one door behind me and one door ahead of me. They told me to walk through the doors. I was so confused because it couldn't have been that easy. I was terrified that behind those doors was a firing squad. I spent about 10 minutes in that hallway until that same lady yelled and told me if I don't leave, they will make me leave. I opened the door and I thought I was in New York. I was so confused. There were people walking around and they looked at me as if I was crazy. I heard my name and looked over, and my boyfriend and his sister were running across the street. I fell to my knees and cried. I got into the car and they were asking me what happened. I thought they were recording my answers. I thought the radio was talking to me. The colors of the building were beautiful. I thought they were the way home. Next, I remember being at home and my sister-in-law was asking me who my kids were and pointing at the pictures. I didn't know their names, but I knew their colors. I was really in love with colors. My boyfriend tried to get me to lay down and rest. I thought it was code for him to kill me. I was scared to lay down. Then I thought he was my abuser when I was 5 to 10 years old. I said, "Oh, we have to do this again?" And I said my abuser's name. He was confused and I started taking off all my clothes and crying. He told me to stop and I then told him I'm going to jump out the window, and I got past him and hit out the screen. I remember I was hiding from 2 police officers behind my bed. I was telling them that I'm not going to Mexico again. I got a huge amount of energy and started eating the candy on the TV stand. I remembered that candy makes me sick, so I spit it all out in my hand and threw it at the cops. Then I remember being in the cop car and I got so scared about the AC not being on, but they were really nice to me and told me it's on. I was talking shit to one of the cops and telling him that he's cheating on his wife. They pretty much just laughed and told me to relax. They took me to a mental hospital. I could see my boyfriend and his sister talking to the officers, and I was screaming for him and hitting the car window, but he didn't hear me. They took me in a room. I was back at a young age and started flipping over the chairs and just was full of energy. Soon someone came in and told me to take a seat, and someone else was at the door taking notes. I screamed at the lady taking notes and told her to get the fuck out. When I did this, a bunch of other people came in. One of the people that came in was so handsome. He was tall and had long curly hair. I was amazed by his looks. They told me to sit down and relax, and they are going to help me. I sat down just amazed at him. I told him he looked like Moana. They gave me an antipsychotic shot. He disappeared. I'm still not sure if he was real or not. I then was told to get dressed and take a pee test. That's when I found out I had meth in my system. I lost it because the only thing I was down to do was weed. The nurse who was with me told me mistakes like that happen all the time. I know she was just trying to keep me calm. After this, I was walked with a man who was lecturing me about being sober for my kids and doing better. He let me in this room where there were about 10 recliner chairs, and every single one was covered in white blankets. I screamed that everyone was dead and to take me back. I thought this was a process of death. I sat in the room. I don't remember much until I was led into another room, and it was full of people. I asked for a phone and they gave it to me. I called my mom to come and get me, and she just kept telling me she can't. I would hang up on her, walk around the room, and call her again. I did this more times for me to count. She would still answer and say the same thing. Next, I was in a ward. I was terrified because everyone was in recovering of hardcore drugs. I was sharing a room with a lady. My brain was telling me she was my neighbor who drugged me. I told her in a very serious voice that I know what she did and I will never forgive her for it. I'm pretty sure I scared her and she sat up in her bed with her back against the wall. The next morning we were eating and I was scared to eat. I thought they were poisoning me. A very nice patient that was sitting next to me asked me what was wrong. I told him I'm not going to eat because it's poisonous. He told me that I need to eat or else I won't go home. He then grabbed one of my foods and took a bite out of it and said, "See, nothing's wrong with this." I'm really grateful for this guy because he really looked after me. I truly hope he's doing good. I was so out of it, I don't even remember his name. My favorite time of the day was when my boyfriend would come to visit. I always asked him if he was there to take me home. He would say no. He always looked so tired and sad. I would try to cheer him up by playing cards or something. I hated when he had to leave. I felt very kid-like when he was visiting. After about 8 days, I was released. I was diagnosed with bipolar and was put on a bunch of meds. I really struggled with this experience. The hospital referred me to a counselor. After about a year and 3 counselors later, I found out I was misdiagnosed. My psychosis was because of me getting off my meds too fast and being drugged with something I've never tried before. My brain just freaked out. I actually have bipolar disorder and I didn't need to be on all the medication I was on. I still deal with this every day. This happened in 2018 and I am still in therapy. My relationship went to shit. We are still together, but we did break up a bunch. Life's okay now. I am diagnosed as SMI and I'm seeking Social Security disability insurance. Wish me luck. My takeaway to this is to follow your gut. You never know someone truly, and most importantly, forgive yourself.